Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and this is going to be the tier list for 12.1. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. The support tier list, that is, to clarify. I will be doing tier list for other roles as well. But be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy that content. Come by, check us out on Twitch, usually starting around 11:30 or midnight, going till 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you out there. And I am going to be streaming some other games too when they come out. So we're going to be doing some Total War Warhammer when that comes out, and I'll probably be doing some Magic the Gathering as well. Times on those sort of scheduled TBD, but we're out there playing League every night starting around midnight. So come by, hang out, chat with us, and we'll have a good time. All right, let's go ahead and get in here. So there were some changes to the ADC, specifically to Shield Bow on this patch, and be sure to check out my patch notes from yesterday if you want the lowdown on that. But basically, they took 5 AD off of Shield Bow, and then they took around 150 of the shield off late game. In most games, around level 13 or so, I believe you're going to be clocking in at about 500 to 550 shield on Shield Bow, and you're going to be clocking, rather than before, it was about 650 to 700 on Shield Bow at that same point in the game. So it's significant. It's about 100 less by the time you complete it in most mid to late game fights. So that's going to hurt champions, obviously, that want Shield Bow, that want that kind of protection, right? So Vayne was probably the most notable one, because Shield Bow also gives you Vamp Scepter for the laning phase, which allows you to sustain through a lot of harassment, and it gives you that protection for late game, which is great for skirmishing champions like Vayne, who really thrive in broken fights where there's not clean lines, not clean 5v5s. Because in a clean 5v5, Vayne can get outscaled, right? By like a Jinx or Kog'Maw or Twitch or just anything else that's longer range and can hit multiple targets in a clean 5v5 with front-to-back team fighting. She can lose those, right? Where she really shines is in those skirmishes, those little, broken fights, 2v2, 3v2, 3v4, that type of stuff where everyone doesn't have those clean lines. That's where she really takes off, when she can just run people down, isolate people, and really put out a ton of damage. So the Shield Bow nerf is going to hit her a lot, and they also nerfed Wit's End by taking 10 magic resist off of that. So it still has the same offense, but now champions that get that it's going to be easier to blow them up. So Vayne is another person who got that. So typically she'd go Shield Bow into Wit's End. Now she does have other builds. Obviously, it's not like she can't, succeed with Kraken, or she can't succeed by going something like Phantom Dancer. But it is something that would definitely bring her down just a little bit. And they also are changing teleport on this patch. So that means that there will be less teleports to the bot lane for the first 14 minutes. So champions that can be more aggressive and sort of thrive by, harassing people under tower or pushing in or threatening all ends, those champions, in theory, should be a little bit better right now. So stuff like, Lux, Brand, Zyra, maybe Leona. Now, we'll look at the stats here in a second. Those aren't quite playing out yet the way that I feel like it should. But that is something to keep an eye on to see if that happens. So there's going to be a little bit more of opportunities for blowing people up in the bot lane, because they're not going to have Shield Bow, they're not going to be able to itemize into Wit's End, and they're not going to have that teleport coming down to help them out if you're trying to dive them. I guess they can still teleport to their own tower, but they can't teleport behind and flank you anymore. So in theory, that should favor more aggression in the bot lane. But as we can see here with the statistics and the pick rate, it's looking pretty grim for supports right now. I'm not going to lie. Just statistically, it's looking bad on a lot of supports. Outside of Soraka and Sona, everyone else is looking a lot worse on this patch. So this is preliminary. The patch has only been out for about a day. So we'll keep an eye on these numbers as the patch progresses. But it's looking rough out there. And it's looking rough for the ADCs. So if you look over at the ADCs, popular picks, nobody is 52% or more. Like, all the way down, like, top 10, nobody's 52%. And a lot of them are in the negative. So it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Not all of these champions even use Shield Bow. Obviously, Ezreal's not using Shield Bow. So I'm not entirely sure, precisely what's going on there. I guess just some of the other roles are getting buffs and ADCs aren't. Vayne fell a lot on this. She was 54.5% or something like that before, and now she's lost like 3%. So Vayne notably fell down quite a bit. But even stuff like Twitch is down a little bit, like a percentage point. Kog'Maw's down 1 or 2%. Aphelios is at like 45%. So I'm not really sure why ADCs just across the board are so terrible right now. Because again, a lot of these don't use shield bow. Like Jhin, I feel like rarely gets shield bow. He always wants Gale Force, and then Kai'Sa, you know, is not getting shield bow with most of her builds. So I'm not really sure what's up there, but as far as ADCs and supports, you know, just this one day of the patch are looking pretty rough. So what does that mean overall for the support tier list? Well, I moved Lulu down just a little bit here into B tier because she was really good with Vayne, and now that Vayne's fallen off a little bit, and I think more aggressive bot laners are probably going to be stronger right now. So like your Jins, maybe your Tristana, you know, stuff like that that can really get ahead and pressure early, maybe Misfortune. I feel like once people start to switch and realize that's what the meta is going to be, that's where I think it's going to go. I think Lulu's going to fall off a little bit, and you're going to see more of these champions that play around those types of champs be a little bit stronger. So, like, I think your Nami is going to go up a little bit in value potentially, and like I said, your Lux, I moved her up a little bit there. I know she did get nerfed a couple of patches ago, but I still think she's pretty good, particularly at Platinum and lower. And then something like your Brand, who can, you know, maybe harass under tower. They're not going to be getting the Vamp Scepter anymore, or they're less likely to be getting Vamp Scepter to heal through it. You're not going to get teleport flanked as easily, so that might be an opportunity for someone like a Brand. If people are not doing tanks, you know, Blitzcrank still could be pretty good. But yeah, I think that's kind of how things are going to shake out. So Sona also did get nerfed on this patch. We'll just go ahead and start going through them in order here. Sona did get nerfed on this patch, but she still has a tremendous win rate right now. It didn't affect her hardly at all. I guess it took her down about 1%, which is what I predicted in the patch notes. All they did was they just lowered the cooldown on her E. So, you know, if the fight goes really long, you may not be able to do one more E. And that's just the movement speed, which is nice, but typically you're only doing that probably once per fight anyways, and then her armor per level just got barely nudged. So she's still going to be incredibly powerful right now, and yes, she might get pressured earlier if you do start to see, you know, more Leona's, Brand, stuff like that, but she's still just really, really strong, and the Archangel's staff change did help her out quite a bit. Now, I think she has other items that are pretty good too, like Staff of Flowing Water, but the Archangel Staff, they're pretty much the same win rate right now. Pretty low sample size on the Staff of Flowing Water, but once you complete that Archangels, you're just way stronger in general, and you get that 200 health, which is really nice, gives you that extra survivability, and just really allows you to kind of just spam your heal in the laning phase to sustain through some of that poke that might be coming through, you know, on a Lux or a Brand or something like that. So she is really good. You know, the major problem is just that you can't really start plays with her, and it's hard to get vision with her. So I feel like if you're just kind of in your own natural elo, if you're not smurfing or if you haven't fallen down from a higher elo, I think that she is incredible at Platinum and lower. She's just so consistent, right? It's really hard to mess her up. There are some things you can do to optimize, right? Like making sure that you're getting your green power chords in fights, and things of that nature. And of course, your positioning and just your overall decision making and stuff like that matters. But let's be real, like there are virtually no skill shots on this champion. Early on, the harassment is free. It's just Qs and auto attacks. You have to hit your ult later on, but it's got a pretty big hitbox. You're still useful even if you miss the ult a lot of times. So it's just really hard to mess her up as long as you're careful with your positioning and not chain feeding. Then I think she's just incredibly strong right now, especially if you take Exhaust or Barrier, and then you go for, you know, more defensive items like Archangels that has the health on it over Staff of Flowing Water. Then I think she's just incredibly difficult to deal with. You can even get a defensive boot like the Ionians are greedy, but you can also go, you know, Merc Treads or Ninja Tabby if you have to. If they have assassins or divers and you're afraid they're going to get on top of you. Those still have really high win rates. Pretty low sample sizes on those, but I think that's something people just don't consider enough, is like just get a defensive boot. Like it helps out a ton, especially if you're going to get Archangels. It gives you more effective health with the 200, because obviously the more armor or magic resistance you have, the more valuable your health is. So yeah, she's still going to be really strong. I don't think that did a lot to her. My only qualm with her, like I said, and why I don't play her a lot is just it's difficult to make plays and it's difficult to get back into the game if you're behind. You kind of at the mercy of your team. So you add a ton of guaranteed power to your team, but it's difficult for you to make those plays. You're relying on your teammates to make those decisions, to make those engages. If you have champs that can do that, though, if you have a Vi or a Warwick or a Hecarim or just something that's really, looking to engage, she can be great. But so many times when I've played her, people just want to stand around an ARAM, and especially when we're behind, and I'm like, man, if I was just playing an engaged champion and I could just get vision control, around a bush or something, then maybe we could get a pick and then make something happen after that. So it's just kind of hard to make that happen on Sona. But like I said, it's guaranteed power. She's still going to be really strong, really high win rate. Okay, and then Nami is another one that I think is still really good and really underrated. Nami does have a lot of kill threat in the laning phase, which sets her apart from a lot of other enchanters. Her base damage is pretty high, like on her W and her E. And then, of course, you have the bubble for a huge piece of CC that just really sets up and allows your ADC to get in there and get some kills. So particularly with some of these kill lanes, with a Tristana, with a Lucian, Misfortune, Jhin, she works really, really well with those types of champions. And just the fact that you can go Imperial and get a lot of value out of that early because of the way that it interacts with your E is really, really good. So she's kind of the strong early game pressure, harassment, support that doesn't scale as hard as Sona or Soraka in terms of raw healing and shielding late game, but she does provide quite a bit of utility with her various slows. And if you're really good at hitting that bubble, it's a great piece of CC in team fights, potential 1.5 second knockup on, a bunch of different targets. And then, of course, your ultimate is slow, but if people are just kind of all bogged down in a 5v5 team fight, that can add a lot of value as well. So I think she's still really good. Great aggressive option once the meta starts shifting the way that I think it's going to shift. She's still going to be a strong champion. And the thing that I really like about her is her range. So in team fights, you can play really, really far back and still be effective. Obviously, your R has like a million range, but your E, you can be even further back than the back line potentially, empowering your E on people. And your W, you can throw on an ally and it's going to bounce around and hit enemies and bounce back to allies. And it's got 725 range. So that's kind of the, one of the huge perks that not a lot of people talk about is her effective range, where she can stand and still influence team fights, is further than almost any other enchanter. Right? Because with Sona, to give people those shields, you have to be in like that, 450 range. So you have to position yourself closer to, give your front line those shields, or else you're going to be losing a lot of value on that. And with Soraka, I believe the range on her heal, on her W, is something like 500, so it's pretty close. The only other person with comparable range is probably Janna, but she's pretty far off meta right now, and she doesn't have quite as much utility as Nami does, I don't think, in the current meta. Lulu's shield is only 650 range, and I believe her polymorph is also about 650 range, so Lulu is a little bit closer. So you've got kind of your Sona and Soraka effective ranges are quite close for a ranged champion. Then you've got Lulu is kind of mid-range, and then Nami is sort of your long-range effectiveness. So anyways, I think Nami is really underappreciated and pretty strong right now. And then, of course, we have Rakan. Actually had a new person on the channel, sorry for blanking out on your name, but was asking, like, do you ever play Rakan? You found the right channel. If you're a Rakan fan or trying to learn Rakan, because I play a ton of Rakan. I've played him a lot for years, as pretty much everyone that's watched any of my channel is going to know. And yes, I do think he is still really good. Now, there's always a little asterisk by Rakan, because I think he's the second hardest support to play in the game, just a little behind Thresh. But you really have to put in the time to learn him, right? Because there are a lot of different sequences you can do. Do you open up with your W? Do you R and run Adam and then W? Do you E first to an ally and then W and then R? And then where are you Eing back to? So there's just so many different ways you can sequence these. And people ask me questions, why did I W first and then R? And it's always just kind of complicated in that, because, a lot of people just default to go for the R first and then W. But the thing is, the R has to be on for half a second before you W. And the maximum amount of CC that you can do to somebody with Rakan is W first and then R them after it. And then you can get about 2.5 seconds of CC. Versus if you go in with your R first and then you W, then you're only going to get about 1 second of CC, right? Because you're just going to overlap them, 1 to 1.5 seconds of CC. So it just kind of depends. And if they if you miss your W or they flash it or dash it or whatever, then you didn't really, waste your ultimate. Versus if you run at somebody with your ultimate and then you try to W them and they flash or dash away, then you just wasted your ult. Now, sometimes it is appropriate to run at them with the W. But it just depends. There are just a lot of different situations where you have to make judgment calls on how you're sequencing your things. And the fact that he is somewhat squishy for an engaged champion means that you have to be very, very aware and careful of CC. You don't want to run, face first into the Morgana queue or the Lux queue or just some other piece of CC. You have to figure out how to either flash that or rotate around it with your R or try to bait it. As he gets hard punished. If he gets CC'd, it's a real problem because you're going to get blown up. Versus like an Alistar or a Leona or something like that, it's going to be less of a problem if they get CC'd most of the time because they're so tanky that it's almost a good thing in a lot of cases if they're wasting CC on you after you go in. Rakan's not like that, so you have to learn when to go in and when to get out, and you have to be able to execute that and play around all of the CC the enemy might have. So he's hard to play. You have to practice him. You have to get used to him. He's a very unique champion in that he's an engage enchanter, and there just really aren't a lot of champions like that in the game. So why is he good right now? Well, I think that Shurelya's is a very powerful item in the current meta because there are a lot of bruisers in general that just want to get in there and stick to targets and fight. You've got your Vise, your Warwicks that want to be able to run in and engage. You've got your Tom Kinches, who's still pretty strong in the top lane, your Mundos, then of course like your Darius, your Garens. There are a lot of these bruiser type of champs where if you can just get them in there, if the enemy can't kite them, then they're going to be very effective. So it's just a really strong item, and he's one of the only champs that's buying this item consistently right now. And then he has so many different options at the 2 spot. So you are a good user of Grievous Wounds if you do want to go for the Chemtech Putrefier. That's strong. I've been going for Zeke's Convergence lately. Someone was asking me about this item and why it's so good on Rakan. The main reason you would go Zeke's is it gives you a lot of personal tankiness, and it also gives some utility to your best carry on the team. So usually it gives somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 on hit damage or on spell hit. So it does apply to things like Cassiopeia's Fangs, Azir Soldiers, things like that where Ardent Censer strictly on hit would not trigger. This does trigger with those. So it's spell hits, ability hits, or auto attacks are going to do that extra damage. So it's like a really ramped up buff of the Ardent Censer, but it only affects one player, and it just has a way better stat line than Ardent Censer right now. So it's got the 250 health, 25 armor, it's got a little bit of extra mana, and it has 20 ability haste on it. All of those are absolutely fantastic on Rakan, so you're really getting it just for that extra survivability, which is huge, because like I said, Rakan doesn't have a lot of that in his base stats, and his itemization doesn't give him a lot of tankiness either, typically. So if you go for the Putrefier, this is all good. He does scale really well with ability power, so that's great. It also has the ability haste. It has some mana regen. That's not as good as the flat mana because his base mana regen is not as high as some of the other enchanters out there, but it's still okay. But the big thing that it's missing is it doesn't have any armor on it, doesn't have any health on it. So you're going to be a lot squishier if you go Putrefier. So that's good if they have a lot of healing on their team, but fewer and fewer champions are taking a lot of the big healing items, right? Shield Bow just got nerfed, and then Gore Drinker, a lot of people have been transitioning away from Gore Drinker and getting other things. There are still some Gore Drinker users out there, but people are trying out different builds as well. So you can get the Putrefier, but you can also get Zeke's if you want to get that. Those are probably the two most common ones. Redemption is good, especially at higher elo brackets. If you just really want that extra teamfight heal, that's going to be nice. You do have some, your shields are pretty good in the mid to late game, so that 20% healing and shielding is good. But it's a pretty long cooldown, and it's just not going to be as effective on Rakan as it would be on a Soraka or a Sona, who's going to be healing a lot more. And the lower the elo goes, the less likely it is that people are going to have the situational awareness to stand in the redemption. They might be running away, and you might accidentally place it in the wrong place. Maybe your ally's trying to chase somebody, and you put it right on top of them. You don't lead where they're going with it. So there's definitely a lot of skill involved on you casting it and on your allies actually coordinating and playing around it. So it has a lot of potential. There's just a lot of fail cases on it as well. And with all the grievous wounds out there that are still really popular, it is less effective in a meta where people are still spamming grievous wounds. So anyways, it is a good item, but I think a little more situational. I haven't really tried out Knight's Vow. People have done this in the past. I think they changed it a few patches ago. They may have even nerfed it a little bit. I can't remember, but it's pretty rare. You almost never get that on Rakan. So typically it's going to be Zeke's, and then you just kind of figure out after that what you want to get. Either Zeke's or Putrefier, and then if you get to a third item, you just kind of figure it out from there. But yeah, Rakan, great champion, really good engage, pretty good survivability in the laning phase because you do have the Q to heal you and your ally. You have that repeatable shield, and you have your W to get out of almost any situation if a gank's coming in. So he's just really slippery, just really effective regardless of what's going on in the game. You can roam and make plays. You can all in with people in lane. You can scale a little bit with your shields. You can get utility items like the Zeke's, like the Redemption. So he's just kind of ready to go, you know, in almost any sort of game state. You can find a way to be relevant with Rakan. And that's why I like him so much. He's sort of the Swiss Army knife of supports. With Thresh. Thresh is the other one who has, you know, really good mixture of offense and defense. But Thresh is having a real hard time right now. He's like 47% win rate. They've nerfed him a lot because of pro play, and it's just tough out there for Thresh right now. Okay, next few champions. So we have Soraka. I have her down here. I mean, there's definitely an argument for her being tier 1. She does have a really high win rate. I just think that unless Sona's banned, which she's very rarely picked or banned, even though she's the highest win rate support, I just wouldn't play Soraka most of the time. I just feel like Sona just has more teamfight presence. And one of the big things not a lot of people talk about when comparing Sona and Soraka is the consistency in the laning phase. So with Soraka, you have to hit the Qs to have good trades and to stack up your spell thieves and all that, which means you have to get a little bit closer and you have to actually land it, you know, on people. With Sona, you can't miss. You're going to hit them. They're going to take damage. You're going to get everything stacked up. So it's just a little bit riskier with Soraka. However, if you do hit your Qs all the time, I think it is far more impactful than Sona's Qs because you're dealing damage and you're healing yourself and you're increasing your healing to your allies, and it actually doubles down as wave clear. So you can actually push waves pretty quickly if you want to get a back timing or dragon or, you know, get some good wards in. She has the opportunity to do that. So, and it's I think it's about the same amount of mana, actually. It's pretty close. I think Sona's is slightly more expensive. I think it starts at 50. But it's good. It's just conditional, so you have to hit it. If you're not hitting the Qs, then your W is not going to be as effective. Although it is better, it is more cost efficient than Sona's healing in the laning phase. So she's pretty good. Now she does get countered more than Sona does by grievous wounds, because this is all heal versus Sona's is a split between healing and shielding. So the shielding portion is not reduced by grievous wounds. And Sona is, you know, buffing up her allies' damage with her Q, and she has her ultimate, which is like a huge chain CC. So that's why I tend to favor Sona a little bit more, although Soraka, if she goes sort of untouched, and if you can hit your Qs a ton in the laning phase, she is going to be very strong. She doesn't have movement speed either, so Sona can rotate around the map and help her allies rotate with that E a little bit more. Soraka does get some movement speed in a fight. If you land your Q, or if you're running towards a wounded ally, then you do get a little bit of bonus movement speed, so that is nice. But it's just not as consistent as Sona's ability to rotate around the map, and especially to be able to move your teammates around. Now, this silence in some situations can be like really, really strong, but in other situations it really doesn't do anything. So it just kind of depends. So if they have something that's channeling, like a Rammus rolling in or a Nunu rolling in, you put that silence down, that will stop their channel. So it's incredibly good against those champions. But, you know, if you've got a Zed running at you or something like that, the silence is not going to do a lot. He's just going to take a couple of extra steps and then ult and kill you. So there are some situations where like that can be good, the silence. But there are some situations where it can feel like a really wimpy piece of CC too. So it just kind of depends on what's going on. She's just really, really lacking in the CC department compared to other enchanters. But another thing about her is like this R is incredibly powerful cross map. So if you're really good at watching your minimap and there are some very volatile lanes, you know, something like Fiora versus Camille top, or, you know, something like that where there's going to be a lot of fighting and one champion can snowball very hard on the other one, then you can definitely turn that around and heavily influence the game with those Rs. So, and the lower the elo goes, the more people are just going to be constantly fighting each other all the time, right? So you're going to get a lot of value off of that. And I really prefer to go ulti hunter with her. So you can go like Ghost Poro, Ulti Hunter. The Poro will help you out with your vision early on because it is difficult to get good vision as Soraka because you are really vulnerable if you get caught out. So Ghost Poro helps out with that. Or you could get Taste of Blood if you want a little bit more sustain in the laning phase. I would probably just do Ghost Poro. But Ulti Hunter is so good on her, and I would highly, highly recommend getting Ulti Hunter because it's a huge impact ult. It's really, really big in team fights. It does remove Grievous Wounds as well. So you're going to get the full value out of that. And it's so easy to stack at Ulti Hunter because, again, you can do it cross-map. So you can get those stacks on the top laner, on the mid laner, on the jungler so easily off of those ults. So you get a lot of value out of Ulti Hunter on her. So, like, I understand that boots are nice. And futures market, I don't think most people use that correctly. But I like the rest of this build that they're recommending. I do think Guardian is really good. Airy is nice as well. But I think that if you go this tree, just being able to get Revitalize is massive. You 100% want Revitalize on Soraka because she just gets so much value out of healing and shielding. So you have to have this. If you go for the Airy rune set, then you've got to go Revitalize in your secondary runes because you have to have this rune. Which really limits a lot of your options. A lot of stuff in the sorcery tree outside of Airy isn't that great on her. You know, you can go Mana Flow Ban, but she already has a lot of mana. She doesn't have problems with that. You can get Transcendence, but her cooldowns are already really low on her Q and her W, so, you know, the value on that is somewhat limited. And then Scorch doesn't matter. You know, Gathering Storm is good, but it's basically Airy's good, but the rest of that tree is not so good on her. So that's why I like Guardian is going to be very strong, and then also Revitalize is so good. And then the other two are just like pretty decent kind of role player runes. So anyway, she can be pretty strong. Now, as a third item, it is kind of cute. People, like, you can go Warmogs. They did lower the threshold on Warmogs to just 1100 bonus health. And I haven't fully mathed that out, but I believe if you get Moonstone and then Warmogs, that might be enough. Just with your health per level. You might have to get one or two other things to get that. You can certainly get it third if you want to, but I wouldn't overdo it with that, but just, it's on the table. If there are a lot of assassins that are constantly coming at you, you know, trying to dive you and kill you all the time, you can get the Warmogs, and it is okay on her because, you know, she damages herself to heal people with the W unless you hit your Qs. So it does have good utility, especially if they have a lot of poke. If you're facing like Vel'Koz, Xerath, Lux, you know, that type of stuff. Corki, who's increasingly popular right now. Kaisa with the AP build where she's like spamming, you know, the W rockets on people. That's where Warmogs can be pretty good because it's going to help you sustain through that, and then it's going to allow you to heal other people basically out of combat, and then, you know, sustain through that healing as well. Because, like I said, your heal damages yourself unless you're, you know, actively landing your Qs in combat. So anyway, she does have kind of a unique build in that sense that makes her the best, you know, sustained healer in the game, especially against poke. So anyways, she is very good. There's an argument for putting her in S tier if you want to, but I've got her down in A. Already pretty much mentioned Lulu. I talked about the change to her. I think she is very strong still, and I don't want this to be too long. We'll try to cap this at 35 minutes. But she's still going to be pretty good. You know, you can still put her with a Twitch in particular is strong because he benefits really heavily from the extra attack speed, from the movement speed. Remember that Lulu's passive is somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 on attack damage in the mid game. So anyone that's going to have, you know, really fast attack speed that's going lethal tempo and getting zeal items and things like that, she's going to really thrive in that environment. And then the W, the polymorph, is also very good against particularly squishy champs that are trying to dive your backline. So if you've got a Zed coming in or a Talon or whatever, just being able to ult your ADC and then polymorph the squishy champion is really good. So she's one of the best champions at, enemies who are trying to dive a single target on the back line. She's, really proficient at stopping that. The ultimate also gets around grievous wounds because it's an infusion of health, not a heal, an infusion of health. So it doesn't benefit from plus healing and shielding, like you get off Moonstone or Redemption, but it's also not affected by grievous wounds. So she's very good at buffing up a single target ally. I think that's sort of her her major contribution. So if that's the kind of thing that you want, if you're going to have a really fed Vayne, Twitch, some other type of hyper carry, then she's going to be good. Although, like I said earlier, she's not quite as strong with champions that don't scale as well with attack speed, so it doesn't work very well with like Ezreal or Jhin or just some of those other champs that aren't going to be building those types of items. She's not horrible in those situations. It's just not optimal. Okay. And then Lux is another one. She did get nerfed a few patches ago, but I still think she's pretty good. She's reasonably popular right now. I think if you do want to go for an all-in, like long-range poke/engage champion, she's probably the best option. So out of, between like her, Xerath, Vel'Koz, Brand, Zyra, that type of stuff, I'd probably go with Lux. Just because her E is very consistent, it's pretty easy to hit. It also gives you vision late game and helps protect you when you're trying to ward, which is nice because it provides a pretty big slow and gives you, like I said, kind of a pretty long amount of time where you have that free vision for like 5 seconds. So she's better at warding than a lot of the other mages are. Zyra's pretty good at it too, but she's really Lux is good at it as well. And, if you get ahead, she's really strong. I mean, that laser does a ton of damage, has really nice wave clear, so the lower the elo goes, when your team's just not managing the waves properly, and you can just ult and pick up, that extra CS and just put it in the tower and deny the enemy experience. That does add up, over time. So that is pretty nice that she does have a really good wave clear. And then, of course, her bind, I think, is still like 2 seconds at level 1, which is pretty crazy. So she's good. It's just like a lot of other mages, her items are very expensive. So if you get behind, it can feel really bad. If the enemy has a lot of mobility and they can, just dash or blink around your Q and, dodge it, then she loses a lot of her power if she misses her Q. So it is still risky to play her, in my opinion. But, if you play her well, I think that she can succeed. Brand is another one who still going to be pretty strong. I think the nerf to Demonic was probably bad for him. I'm not sure if it really affected him that much. I have to look and see. Leandri's is still pretty good on him, and he provides, a lot of pressure in the laning phase. He's got pretty good wave clear, and he harasses very well under tower. So if you can push people in and get him under tower, and he's just spamming those W's on people, he can put in some work. So I do think he gets a little bit of extra value. I bumped him up a couple of steps just because there are going to be less Vamp Scepters rolling around. There's going to be less teleport flanks on you, and that's going to be nice for him. But as usual, with all the AP champions, his items are expensive. It feels really bad when you're behind. You just don't have a lot of utility outside of your damage. So he's a nice pick if your team is really low on AP and you just need a little... You just, really want to threaten AP and force them to get some kind of magic resist. He's good. So if you have an AD top laner, AD mid laner, that type of thing, then Brand might be a pretty reasonable person to, come in the support role. And also, I don't remember where I was going with that. But yeah, he's good. You could play him. He could definitely work. Okay, I'll come back to that if I remember. I think my mind was already moving on to Blitzcrank there, and I tried to backpedal for a second. Didn't work out very well. But anyways, okay. So Blitzcrank's still going to be really good, particularly if the enemy team doesn't have a lot of tanks. So tanks have been coming back. They have been pretty proficient lately. You've seen like Mundo and Tom Kench and those types of champs perform pretty well in the top lane, and then things like Warwick, doing well in the jungle. So if they have a lot of tanks, and that sort of takes away potential grab targets, so that could be bad. But if they have a lot of squishy champions, especially immobile squishy champions, he's going to be really good. There are less shield bows. Now, he was very good against shield bow to begin with because his R would break the shield and then apply the damage. So he was just naturally good against shield bow. But this is going to make him even better, right? Because you don't even have to worry about, how you're sequencing your R. One kind of like... I don't know, tension there with Blitzcrank is when you pull with your R, you kind of like want to immediately, or pull with your Q, you want to immediately R to silence them so that they can't like dash out before you uppercut them. Because if you just pull them in with your hook and then you try to punch them after that, they do have a window there where they can flash first or blink first. They'll still get knocked up, but they get that distance. So if you do want to keep them there where they can't, you know, flash away, then you have to use your R when they're coming in with the hand, and then you punch them for the knockup. So if you're doing that, if you're using the R in that way, the shield bow may not be activated yet at that point. So that does create a moment of tension. So you don't have to worry about that as much if people aren't getting shield bow. So anyways, still a good champion, but you know, gotta make sure that you land those hooks. And more people are also getting things like Banshee's Veil and Edge of Night and you know, just some of these other annoying items that are really good against Blitzcrank. And then Zyra, still pretty good. I have her back a little bit from Brand just because... Oh, what I was going to say with Brand, I just remembered. If they have a lot of melee that groups up together, which most champions in other roles that aren't like mid laners or ADCs are playing melees right now. There are some range tops, but most tops and junglers are playing melee. So if they have a bunch of melee on their team, then Brand, you know, is obviously going to shine in those situations where he gets, you know, a lot of effective bounces in team fights. Okay, so Zyra is still pretty good. She just doesn't harass under tower as well because she needs the plants, and if they're under the tower, then the tower is just going to kill the plants. So she's really good if you want to zone, but less good if you want to push and pressure under tower, which I think the changes to teleport are really encouraging you to do right now. So that's just why I brand up a little bit more, but they're very close. I think they can both be, you know, pretty much in the same ballpark. And then finally, the last one that I'll talk about in depth here is going to be Maokai. I still think that he is pretty good. The removal of shield bow basically is going to help a lot with harassment because people aren't going to have as much sustain. So maybe the AP build makes a little bit of a comeback here. Kind of depends on how the rest of the meta is going to shake out. But that could be pretty good, you know, for poke. He has Supreme Vision Control with those seeds. They last a really long time. They do quite a bit of damage. I know that the changes to Demonic Embrace a few patches ago are very good for him. So I don't know if I've tried it out since those changes came in. I think I did for a little bit. I did okay on him. So the tank version, I think, I don't know. I just haven't had a lot of success on it. You can try it out and see what you think. You know, where you go like Dead Man's Plate first, then usually you'll get either a Locket or Evershroud or something like that. I just would much rather go for like Mandate Demonic. I just think that gives you more utility, more poke, and really plays around the vision game a lot more. So I think Maokai is really underrated right now. I think that he can be quite good in a lot of comps, especially if you need an AP champion that also, you know, provides a lot of CC and has really good vision control. So he doesn't have like the raw kill power in the open field as something like a Lux or a Brand if you land your stuff. But he's just going to provide that steady, this really reliable vision, reliable poke damage, and he has a lot more CC than those champs, and he has much higher base stats, so he's going to have more armor, more magic resist, more health, and so that means that he's going to be much more difficult to assassinate than some of those other champions. So there's probably some permutation of build that you can play with Maokai and have him be effective in almost every game. You just kind of have to figure out on your own, you know, how do you want to negotiate that? Do you want to do Comet for that extra harassment, or do you want to take Aftershock? Like, you can go something like Aftershock and still go for an AP build, or you could go Comet with a tank build. You probably wouldn't want to do that. You probably want to go Aftershock if you're going tank. But you definitely can do Aftershock with the AP build if you think you're going to get more value out of that than the Comet. But it just depends. But there's a lot of different ways you can play him. I think he just has a really effective kit that can work well as a support right now. And then the final, you know, champions here. We've got Leona, same old story, although her win rate is far lower right now. That might change. I was thinking she'd be one of the biggest beneficiaries of the no shield bow, no teleports in the bot lane, but her win rate is still abysmal right now. It's like 49%, so I'm not entirely sure what's up with that. I think a lot of it has to do with the comeback mechanics where people get a lot more gold in the mid game. It's just really hard to snowball and close, so games are going a bit longer, and she does get outscaled late game. by a lot of the enchanters. So I do think that if Jhin and Tristana become more popular, if people quit goofing around with like AP Kaisa and now Vayne and stuff like that, and they play champions that can actually fight in the laning phase, I think that Leona will come back a little bit. They did nerf her as well, I think, near the end of the season. I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been a little bit of armor or something off of her W. I can't precisely remember, but anyways, I still think that she's okay. Alistar has nice sustain, has really good engage, kind of like Leona. I think if people start playing more Jhin, Tristana, possibly Draven, stuff like that, then Alistar is going to be stronger. He is one of the best roamers in the game just because all he needs is mobility boots, and he could start tower diving, level 6, and just, rotate around the map and just completely take over the game just off of those roams. But that takes a lot of knowledge of matchups and really good communication, and usually that works a lot better in higher elos where people are going to, prepare the lanes for you, where they're going to make it to where they're getting pushed into slowly. They're going to be controlling the vision with control wards and things like that. So they're going to set it up. They're going to set you up for success if you're in Masters or Challenger. So if you see Alicopter, taking over the game, roaming as Alistar in Challenger, just be aware that it's harder to do that than it seems in something like Silver, because people are not going to prepare the lanes for you. They're not going to communicate the vision. They're not going to help you control it. And your ADC is probably going to die if you leave the lane. So that's why I have, some people in chat sometimes are like, why don't you roam more? Why don't you do this more? And I'm like, well, it just depends on the situation, because it's a huge risk to roam, especially in Platinum and lower, because your ADC, there's a really good chance they might die, and if they do, they're going to get tilted, they're going to start blaming you, and it's not going to be a good situation. So there are good times to roam, and you do want to be looking for it, but you just have to be a bit more careful with that than you would in other elo brackets, because you're going to get punished for it a lot harder in lower elos. It's like the probability of success is lower, and the risk is much higher. Okay, and then Yumi's okay. She still scales incredibly well. She does have a negligible laning phase. She doesn't do a ton. And she's really just all about those single target buffs. So I think that she is good with like Twitch specifically, and there are a couple other ones where she can be good. But I just think that she's really, really risky right now overall. She can be good, but she's just supremely terrible at roaming and vision, and it's just really, really hard to make plays on her. Thresh, if you hard dominate early, you can take over as Thresh. There are still Thresh 1 tricks that find a lot of success with him, but he has been nerfed. The early game, like I said, it's a lot harder to snowball games off of that, so games inevitably go to the mid and late much more often, and although it can work, if you're landing hooks late game, his damage does fall off. He has a really hard time accessing the back line, and he's just incredibly difficult to play at a really high level. So if you want to play him, he is a lot of fun. You can definitely succeed on him, but historically Thresh is at his best in a meta where you can snowball hard off of the early game and where people aren't playing a ton of tanks, and that's kind of the exact opposite of what's going on right now. Okay, and that's going to pretty much be it. I know there are a bunch of other champions here, but I am trying to make these tier lists a little bit shorter, keep them 45 minutes to an hour. So, yeah, in general, I think it's still mostly an enchanter meta, although I think that engaged champs, if you are really proficient on them, can be very good, particularly Rakan or Blitzcrank, can be very effective if you need some playmakers, but, a lot of the other engaged champs are really having a hard time right now. Your Nautiluses, your Alistars, your Leonas, a lot of those champs, it's just so hard to snowball, and you just get outscaled. Like Leona's clocking in at 49%, Thresh is like 47. It's just brutal out there for a lot of the champions. I don't know what Nautilus is. He's probably like 49, something like that. Yeah, he's about 50%. Rel's at like 52, so maybe there's some new technology with Rel out there, but it's still going to be a lot of enchanters right now, I think. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Come by, check out the stream. Let me know what you think. Are there some new builds out there that you think I might be overlooking that are really good right now, or that you've seen some other, high-end content creators or streamers playing that you like my commentary on, or maybe want me to try out? I'm happy to have, whatever discussion you want. So Anyways, that's going to be it. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.